Avatâras by Annie Besant. Chapter 1. What is an Avatâra? Brothers, whenever we assemble to examine the fundamental verities of all faiths, I am inevitably overwhelmed by the vastness of the subject and the insignificance of the expositor, by the magnitude of the horizon that expands before our intellects, and the inadequacy of the words that endeavor to portray it to your vision. Year after year we convene. Time and again we strive to fathom those great mysteries of life and of the self, which constitute the only subject truly worthy of man's deepest contemplation. All else is fleeting, all else is transient, all else is but the plaything of a moment. Fame, power, wealth, and science, all that exists in this netherworld is as nothing when compared to the grandeur of the eternal self within the universe and within man. One in all his manifold manifestations, marvelous and beautiful in every form he projects. And this year, of all the manifestations of the Supreme, we shall dare to study the holiest of holies, those manifestations of God in the world wherein he reveals himself as divine, descending to aid the world he has fashioned, shining forth in his essential nature, with the form serving as but a tenuous film that scarcely veils the divinity from our gaze. How, then, shall we venture to approach it? How shall we dare to undertake this study, save with the deepest reverence and the profoundest humility? For if the study of his works requires patience, reverence, and humbleness of heart, how much more is required when we study him whose works but partially reveal him? When we attempt to comprehend the significance of an avatar, the meaning and the purpose of such a revelation. Our President has truthfully observed that a belief in such manifestations exists in all the world's faiths, and that ancient maxim regarding truth, which serves as the hallmark on silver, proving the metal's purity, is valid here. That whatever has been believed everywhere, at every time, and by everyone is true, that is reality. Religions contend over many details. Men dispute many propositions. Yet where the human heart and the human voice speak in unison, there one finds the mark of truth. There one discovers the sign of spiritual reality. However, in addressing this subject, a difficulty confronts us, confronts you as auditors and myself as speaker. In every modern religion, truth is shorn of her full proportions. The intellect alone cannot grasp the many aspects of the one truth. Consequently, we witness school following school, philosophy succeeding philosophy, each presenting one aspect of truth while ignoring, or even denying, other aspects which are equally valid. Nor is this all. As the age advances from century to century, from millennium to millennium, knowledge grows dimmer and spiritual insight becomes rarer. Those who merely repeat far outnumber those who truly know, and those who speak with a clear vision of spiritual verity are lost amidst the multitudes who cling only to traditions, the origins of which they fail to comprehend. The priest and the prophet, to employ two familiar terms, have, in later times, ever come into conflict with one another. The priest maintains the traditions of antiquity. Too often, he has lost the knowledge that rendered them real. The prophet, appearing from time to time with the divine word burning like fire upon his lips, proclaims the ancient truth and illuminates tradition. Yet those who cling to the letter of tradition are prone to be blinded by the light of that fire and to cry heretic against the one who speaks the truth they have lost. Therefore, in religion after religion, when some great teacher has arisen, there has been opposition, clamor, and rejection, because the truth he spoke was too mighty to be confined within the narrow limits of half-blinded men. Regarding the subject we are to study today, certain grooves have been formed, certain ruts, as it were, in which the human mind runs. I am aware that in laying the occult truth before you, I must inevitably, at certain points, come into conflict with the details of a tradition that is repeated by memory rather than understood, and beneath which the truths are not grasped. Pardon me, then, my brothers, if in a discourse on this great topic I should sometimes cross the dividing lines of various schools of Hindu thought. I dare not narrow the truth I have learned to suit the limitations that have accumulated through the ignorance of ages, nor make that which is spiritual verity conform to the empty traditions remaining in the faiths of the world. By the duty laid upon me by the Master whom I serve, by the truth he has bidden me speak to the ears of men of all faiths in this modern world. By these, I must declare to you what is true, regardless of whether or not you agree with it at the moment. For the truth that is spoken wins submission eventually, if not immediately. And anyone who speaks of the issues of antiquity must articulate the truths they taught in their days, rather than repeating the mere commonplaces of modern commentators and the petty orthodoxies that encompass us on every side and divide man from man. I propose, in order to simplify this vast subject, to arrange it under certain headings. First, I propose to remind you of the two great divisions recognized by all who have reflected on the subject. Then to address, specifically for this morning, the question, what is an avatar? Tomorrow we shall pose and strive to answer, at least partially, the question, who is the source of avatars? Subsequently, we shall examine special avatars, both of the cosmos and of human races. Thus, I hope to place before you a clear, definite succession of ideas on this great subject, not asking you to believe them merely because I speak them. Your reason is the tribunal before which every truth must appear if it is to be true for you, and you err deeply, almost fatally, if you permit the voice of authority to impose itself where your own understanding does not respond. Every truth is true for you only as you perceive it, and as it illuminates the mind. And truth, however absolute, is not yet truth for you unless your heart opens to receive it, just as the flower unfolds its heart to receive the rays of the morning sun. First, then, let us accept a statement that men of every religion will acknowledge. Divine manifestations of a special nature occur from time to time as the need for their appearance arises, and these special manifestations are distinguished from the universal manifestation of God in his cosmos. For one must never forget that in the humblest creature crawling upon the earth, Ishvara is present, just as he is in the highest Deva. However, there are certain special manifestations distinguished from this general self-revelation in the cosmos, and it is these which are called forth by specific necessities. Two terms in particular have been employed in Hinduism to mark a certain distinction in the nature of the manifestation: the word avatar and the word avesha. We need pause only for a moment on the definition of these terms, which are important to us because their literal significations point to the fundamental difference between the two. The word avatar, as you are aware, has as its root t, meaning passing over, and with the added prefix ava, one derives the concept of descent, one who descends. That is the literal meaning of the word. The other word has as its root v, meaning permeating, penetrating, or pervading, and therein lies the thought of something that is permeated or penetrated. Thus, while in the former case, avatar, there is the concept of a descent from above, from Ishvara to man or animal. In the latter, there is rather the idea of an entity already existing who is influenced, permeated, and pervaded by the divine power, specially illuminated, as it were. Thus, we perceive a kind of intermediate stage, if one may be permitted the expression, between the divine manifestation within the avatar and that within the cosmos, specifically, a partial divine manifestation within an entity permeated by the influence of the Supreme, or by another being who effectively dominates the individual, the ego thus infused. What, then, are the circumstances that precipitate these momentous manifestations? None can speak with greater authority on this point than he who descended as an avatar immediately prior to the commencement of our current age, the divine Lord Sri Krishna himself. Let us turn to that marvelous poem, the Bhagavad Gita, specifically to the fourth Adhyaya, shlokas 7 and 8. Therein, he elucidates the causes that draw him forth to take birth within his world in the manifested form of the Supreme. Whenever there is a decline of righteousness, O descendant of Bharata, and a rise of unrighteousness, then I manifest myself. For the protection of the good, for the destruction of the evil, and for the establishment of righteousness, I come into being age after age. When dharma, righteousness, law decays, and when adharma, unrighteousness, lawlessness is exalted, then I myself come forth. For the protection of the virtuous, for the destruction of the wicked, and for the firm establishment of dharma, I am born from age to age. Such is his explanation regarding the advent of the Avatar. Specifically, the exigencies of his world summon him to manifest himself in his divine power. Furthermore, we discern from his other utterances that, in addition to requirements stemming from human needs, certain cosmic necessities in the primordial eras of the world's history invoked special manifestations. When the great wheel of evolution requires another revolution, or when a novel form or type of life is emerging, the Supreme reveals himself, embodying the archetype he thereby initiates within his cosmos. In this manner, he rotates that everlasting wheel, which he comes forth as Ishvara to turn. Such, then, speaking generally, is the definition of the term and the objective of the Advent. From this premise, we may appropriately turn to the more specific inquiry. What is an avatar? It is here that I must request your close attention, nay, your patient consideration, as I present points that may be somewhat unfamiliar. As previously stated, I intend to partially unveil the occult perspective of the truth. Those who have not previously studied truth in this manner must reflect carefully before rejecting it, and consider at length before refusing it. As we attempt to answer this question, we shall observe the extent to which the great authorities assist our understanding, and the degree to which a lack of knowledge in interpreting those authorities has resulted in misconception. You may recall that the late learned T. Subba Rao, in his lectures on the Bhagavad Gita, posited a specific view of the Avatar, that it constitutes a descent of Ishvara, or, as he expressed it using the theosophical term, the Logos, which is merely the Greek nomenclature for Ishvara, a descent of Ishvara uniting himself with a human soul. With all due respect for the profound erudition of the lamented pundit, I cannot help but consider that to be only a partial definition. It is probable that he did not desire at that time, or possibly lacked the time, to address each instance individually, given the extensive field he had to cover within a limited number of lectures. Therefore, he selected one form of self-revelation, leaving others untouched, aspects which we, addressing the subject exclusively, now have ample time to study. Permit me, then, to commence at the very beginning, and subsequently cite certain authorities that may render this view more acceptable. Let me state, without any attempt to veil or evade, the true nature of an avatar. Fundamentally, he is the result of evolution. In far distant kalpas, in worlds other than this, nay, in universes anterior to our own, those destined to become avatars ascended the vast ladder of evolution slowly, step by step. They climbed from mineral to plant, from plant to animal, from animal to man, and from man to Jivanmukta. From Jivanmukta they ascended higher still, up the mighty hierarchy that extends beyond those who have liberated themselves from the bonds of humanity. Finally, in this ascent, they not only cast off all limits of the separated ego and burst asunder the limitations of the separated self, but they also entered Ishvara himself. There they expanded into the all-consciousness of the Lord, becoming one in knowledge, as they had ever been one in essence, with that eternal life from which they originally emerged. They became living centers without circumferences, abiding in that life, one with the Supreme. Behind such a one stretches an endless chain of birth after birth, of manifestation after manifestation. During the stage in which he was human, throughout the long ascent of the ladder of humanity, two distinct characteristics distinguished the future avatar from the ranks of ordinary men. The first was his absolute bhakti, his devotion to the Supreme. Only those who are bhaktas and who have wedded jnana or knowledge to their bhakti can attain this goal. For, as Sri Krishna declares, only by devotion can a man enter into his being. The necessity of this devotion for the future avatar is as follows. He must preserve the center he has constructed even within the life of Ishvara. This ensures he retains the capacity to once again draw the circumference around that center, enabling him to emerge as a manifestation of Ishvara. One with him in knowledge, one with him in power, the very Supreme himself in earthly existence. Consequently, he must possess the power to limit himself to form, for no form can exist in the universe unless there be a center within it around which that form is delineated. He must be so devoted that he is willing to remain in the service of the universe for as long as Ishvara himself abides within it, sharing in the continual sacrifice made by him, the sacrifice whereby the universe sustains its life. Yet, devotion alone does not distinguish this great one who ascends his divine path. He must also be, as Ishvara is, a lover of humanity. Unless the flame of love for men burns within him, nay, why do I say men? It is too narrow a term. Unless the flame of love burns within him for all that exists, moving and unmoving, in this universe of God, he shall not be capable of coming forth as the Supreme, whose life and love reside in everything he has generated from his eternal and inexhaustible life. There is nothing, says the Beloved, moving or unmoving, that may exist bereft of me. Unless the man can integrate this truth into his nature, unless he can love all that exists, not only the beautiful but the ugly, not only the good but the evil, not only the attractive but the repellent, unless he perceives the self in every form, he cannot ascend the steep path that the avatar must tread. Bhagavad Gita. These, then, are the two great characteristics of the individual destined to become the special manifestation of God. Bhakti, or love for the one in whom he is to merge, and love for those whose very existence is the life of God. Only as these qualities emerge within the man is he upon the path that leads him to become, in future universes, in far distant kalpas, an avatar descending as God to man. I am aware that difficulties arise regarding this perspective on the nature of an avatar. However, these difficulties stem from a partial view, and from the fact that such a view is usually accepted merely on the authority of some great name, rather than through the rigorous thought and thorough understanding of the individual who repeats the shibboleth of his own sect or school. Once that view is adopted, every text in Shruti or Smriti that contradicts it is distorted from its natural meaning to align with the idea that already dominates the mind. This is the difficulty inherent in every religion. A man acquires his perspective by tradition, by habit, by birth, by public opinion, and by the environment of his own time and era. He discovers within the scriptures, which appertain to no specific time, day, age, or people, but rather stand as expressions of the eternal Veda, numerous passages that fail to align with the narrow framework he has constructed. And because he frequently prioritizes the framework over the truth, he manipulates the text until it can be forced to conform in some dislocated manner. Indeed, the ingenuity of the commentator is too often manifested in the skill with which he compels words to signify that which they do not denote in their grammatical and obvious sense. Thus, adherents of every school, invoking the mighty names of those who possessed knowledge of the truth, but who could impart only such portion of it as they deemed humanity at that time capable of receiving, employ these names to bolster erroneous interpretations, and thus walls are continually erected to obstruct the advancing life of mankind. Now, let me cite an example from one of the most illustrious names, one who understood the truth he articulated, but who also, like every teacher, was compelled to recall that while he was a man, those to whom he addressed himself were children unable to grasp truth with virile understanding. That great preceptor, founder of one of the three schools of the Vedanta, Sri Ramanujacharya, in his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, a priceless work by which men of every school might profit, addressing the phrase wherein Sri Krishna declares that he has experienced many births, elucidates how vast the variety of those births has been. Then, confining himself to his manifestations as Ishvara, that is, after he had attained the Supreme, he asserts quite truly that he was born by his own will, not by karma that compelled him, nor by any external force that coerced him, but by his own volition he came forth as Ishvara and incarnated in one form or another. Yet, nothing is stated therein regarding the innumerable steps traversed by the Mighty One ere he merged himself into the Supreme. These are set aside, unmentioned and unnoticed, because the writer's intention was to present to the hearts of men a great object of adoration, who might gradually elevate them higher and higher until the self should blossom within them in turn. No mention is made of the previous kalpas, or of the universes stretching backward into the illimitable past. He speaks of his birth as Deva, as Naga, as Gandharv, and of those manifold shapes he has assumed by his own will. As you are aware, or as you may discover if you consult the Srimad Bhagavata, there exists a list of manifestations far more extensive than the 10 usually designated as avatars. Therein are presented, one after another, forms that appear strange to the superficial reader when associated in modern thought with the Supreme. However, we find illumination cast upon this question by other words of the great Lord. Furthermore, we discover in a celebrated text, replete with occult intimations, though lacking extensive explanation of the hints provided, namely the Yoga Vasiha, a clear and definite statement that the deities, such as Mahadeva, Vihu, and Brahma, have all ascended to the mighty stations they occupy. And this may well be so, if one reflects upon it. There is nothing derogatory to them in this concept. For there is but one existence, the eternal fount of all that emerges as separate, whether separated in the universe as Ishvara, or separated in the microcosm of the universe within man. There is but one without a second. There is no life but his, no independence but his, no self-existence but his, and from him gods, men, and all beings derive their root and exist forever in and by his one eternal life. There are different stages of manifestation, yet the one self resides in all the various stages, the one living in all. And if it be true, as indeed it is, that the self in man is unborn, constant, eternal, and ancient, it is because the self in man is one with the one self-existent, and Ishvara himself is merely the mightiest manifestation of that one who knows no second near himself. As an English poet states, Closer is he than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. The Self resides in you and in me, just as the Self resides in Ishvara, that one, eternal, unchanging, and undecaying, of whom every manifested existence is but a single ray of glory. Thus, that which is taught in the Yoga Vasiha is true. It is true that even the greatest, before whom we bow in worship, has climbed in ages past all human reckoning to become one with the Supreme, and, abiding there, to manifest himself as God to the world. We now arrive, however, at a distinction that we find established, and it is a substantial one. We read of a Purnavatara, a full, complete avatar. What is the significance of that word full as applied to the avatar? The appellation is bestowed, as we are aware, upon Sri Krishna. He is specially designated by that title. Truly, the word pura cannot apply to the illimitable, the infinite. He may not be exhibited in any form. The eye may never behold him. Only the spirit that is himself can know the One. What is signified thereby is that, insofar as is possible within the limits of form, the manifestation of the formless appears. To the greatest extent possible, it came forth in that Great One who arrived for the succor of the world. This may assist you in grasping the distinction. Where the manifestation is that of a Purnavatara, then at any moment, at his own volition, through yoga or otherwise, he can transcend every limit of the form to which he binds himself by his own will, and shine forth as the Lord of the universe, within whom the entire universe is contained. Reflect for a moment once more upon Sri Krishna, who instructs us so profoundly on this matter. Turn to that great repository of spiritual wisdom, the Mahabharata, specifically to the Ashvamedha Parva, which contains the Anujata, and you will discover that Arjuna, after the great battle, having forgotten the instruction imparted to him on Kurukshetra, requested his teacher to repeat that teaching once again. And Sri Krishna, rebuking him for the fickleness of his mind and stating that he was greatly displeased that such knowledge should have been forgotten through inconstancy, uttered these remarkable words. It is not possible for me to state it in full in that manner. I discourse to thee on the Supreme Brahman, having concentrated myself in yoga. He then proceeds to articulate the essence of that teaching, though not in the same sublime form as we possess it in the Bhagavad Gita. This serves to demonstrate the meaning of a Purnavatara. In a state of yoga, into which he projects himself at will, he recognizes himself as Lord of all, as the Supreme upon whom the universe is founded. Nay more, thrice at least, I am uncertain if there may have been additional instances, but if so, I cannot at present recall them. Thrice at least during his life as Sri Krishna, he revealed himself as Ishvara, the Supreme. Once in the court of Dhritarashtra, when the madly foolish Duryodhana spoke of imprisoning within cell walls the universal Lord whom the universe cannot confine, and to demonstrate the wild folly of the arrogant prince, there in the court before every eye he shone forth as Lord of all, filling earth and sky with his glory, and all forms, human and divine, superhuman and subhuman, were seen gathered around him in the life from which they spring. Then on Kurukshetra to Arjuna, his beloved disciple, to whom he granted the divine vision that he might behold him in his Vaibhava form, the form of Vihu, the supreme upholder of the universe. And later, on his return to Dvaraka, meeting with Uttanka, he and the sage arrived at a misunderstanding, and the sage was preparing to curse the Lord, to save him from the folly of uttering a curse against the Supreme, as a child might cast a tiny pebble against a rock of immemorial age. He shone forth before the eyes of him who was truly his Bhakta, and revealed to him the great Vaibhava form, that of the Supreme. What do those manifestations demonstrate? that at will he can reveal himself as Lord of all, casting aside the limits of the human form in which men abide, discarding the appearance so familiar to those around him. He could reveal himself as the mighty one, Ishvara, who is the life of all. Herein lies the mark of a Purnavatara. Always within his grasp, at will, resides the power to manifest himself as Ishvara. But why, the thought may arise in your minds, are not all avatars of this nature, seeing that all are verily of the Supreme Lord? The answer is that by his own will, by his own Maya, he veils himself within the limits which serve the creatures whom he has come to succor. Ah, how distinct he is, this mighty one, from you and me. When we converse with someone who possesses slightly less knowledge than ourselves, we expound upon all we know to display our erudition, expanding ourselves to the utmost to astonish and cause to marvel the one to whom we speak. That is because we are so small that we fear our greatness will not be recognized unless we magnify ourselves to astonish, or if possible, to terrify. But when he comes who is truly great, who is mightier than anything he produces, he diminishes himself in order to aid those whom he loves. And are you aware, my brothers, that only in proportion as his spirit enters into us can we, in our limited measure, be helpers in the universe of which he is the sole life? Until we, in all our actions and speech, place ourselves within the one we desire to help and not outside him, feeling as he feels, thinking as he thinks, knowing for the time as he knows, with all his limitations, although further knowledge may exist beyond, we cannot truly be of assistance. That is the condition of all genuine help rendered by man to man, just as it is the sole condition of the help bestowed upon man by God himself. Thus, in other avatars, he limits himself for the sake of humanity. Consider the great king Sri Rama. What did he come to demonstrate? The ideal Kshatriya in every relation of the Kshatriya life. As a son, perfect as a son alike to a loving father and to a jealous, and for the time unkind, stepmother. For you may recall that when the father's wife, who was not his own mother, commanded him to depart into the forest on the very eve of his coronation as heir, his gentle answer was, "Mother, I go." Perfect as a son, perfect as a husband. Had he not limited himself by his own will to exemplify what a husband should be to a wife, how could he, in the forest, when Sita had been torn away by Ravana, have displayed such grief, have uttered the piteous lamentations which have drawn tears from thousands of eyes, as he calls upon plants and trees, upon animals and birds, upon gods and men, to tell him where his wife, his other self, the life of his life, had gone? How could he have taught men what a wife should be to a husband's heart unless he had limited himself? The consciously omnipresent deity could not seek and search for his beloved who had disappeared. And then as king, as perfect a king as he was a perfect son and husband. When the welfare of his subjects was concerned, when the safety of the realm was to be considered, when he remembered that he, as king, stood for God and must be perfect in the eyes of his subjects, so that they might render the obedience and loyalty which men can only give to one whom they acknowledge as greater than themselves, then even his wife was set aside. Then came the test of the fire for Sita, the unsullied and the suffering. Then she must pass through it to demonstrate that no sin or pollution had befallen her by the foul touch of Ravana, the Rakshasa. Then came the demand that ere the husband's heart that had been riven might again clasp the wife, she must come forth pure as woman. And all this because he was king as well as husband, and on the throne the people honored as divine there must be only purity, spotless as the driven snow. Those limitations were required in order that a perfect example might be provided to man, and that man might learn to ascend by reproducing virtues, made small so that his limited grasp might hold them. We arrive now at the second great class of manifestations, that to which I alluded in the beginning as covered by the broad term avesha. In that case, it is not that a man in past universes has climbed upward and has become one with Ishvara. Rather, it is that a man has ascended so far as to become so great, so perfect in his manhood, and so full of love and devotion to God and man, that God is able to permeate him with a portion of his own influence, his own power, his own knowledge, and send him forth into the world as a superhuman manifestation of himself. The individual ego remains. That is the great distinction. The man is there, though the power that is acting is the manifested God. Therefore, the manifestation will be colored by the special characteristics of the one over whom this overshadowing is cast, and you will be able to trace, in the thoughts of this inspired teacher, the characteristics of the race, of the individual, of the form of knowledge which belongs to that man in the incarnation in which the great overshadowing takes place. That is the fundamental difference. But here we find that we come at once to endless grades, endless varieties, and down the ladder of lesser and lesser evolution we may tread, step by step, until we reach the lower grades that we term inspiration. In a case of avesha, it generally continues through a great portion of the life, the latter portion as a rule, and it is comparatively seldom withdrawn. Inspiration, as generally understood, is a more partial phenomenon, more temporary. Divine power descends, illuminates, and irradiates the man for the moment, and he speaks for the time with authority, with knowledge, which in his normal state he would probably be unable to encompass. Such are the prophets who have illuminated the world age after age. Such were, in ancient days, the Brahmas who were the mouth of God. Then, truly, the distinction was not that of which I spoke between priest and prophet. Both were united in the one illumination, and the teaching of the priest and the preaching of the prophet ran on the same lines and set forth the same great truths. But in later times the distinction arose through the failure of the priesthood, when the priest turned aside for money, for fame, for power, for all the things with which only younger souls ought to concern themselves, human toys with which human babies play, and do wisely in so playing, for they grow thereby. Then the priests became formal, the prophets became increasingly rare, until the great fact of inspiration was relegated wholly to the past, as though God or man had altered, man no longer divine in his nature, God no longer willing to speak words in the ears of men. But inspiration is a fact in all its stages, and it extends far further than some of you may conceive. The inspiration of the prophets, spiritually mighty and convincing, is needed, and they come to the world to impart a new impulse to spiritual truth. But there is a general inspiration that anyone may share who strives to manifest the divine life from which no son of man is excluded. For every son of man is a son of God. Have you ever been drawn away for a moment into higher, more peaceful realms, when you have encountered something of beauty, of art, of the wonders of science, of the grandeur of philosophy? Have you for a time lost sight of the pettiness of earth, of trivial troubles, of small worries and annoyances, and felt yourself lifted into a calmer region, into a light that is not the light of common earth? Have you ever stood before some wondrous picture wherein the palette of the painter has been taxed to illuminate the canvas with all the hues of beauteous color that art can present to human sight? Or have you seen in some wondrous sculpture the gracious living curves that the chisel has liberated from the roughness of the marble? Or have you listened while the diviner spell of music has lifted you, step by step, till you seem to hear the Gandharvas singing and almost perceive the divine flute being played and echoing in the lower world? Or have you stood on the mountain peak with the snows around you and felt the grandeur of the unmoving nature that manifests God as well as the human spirit? Ah, if you have experienced any of these tranquil oases in the desert of existence, then you comprehend how all-pervasive is inspiration. You perceive the wondrous beauty and the power of God manifested in man and in the world. Then you recognize, if you never knew it before, the truth of that great proclamation of Sri Krishna the Beloved. Whatever is royal, good, beautiful, and mighty, understand thou that it proceeds from my splendor. All is the reflection of that Tejas which is his and his alone. For as there is naught in the universe without his love and life, so there is no beauty that is not his beauty, that is not a ray of the illimitable splendor, a solitary beam from the unfailing source of life. Chapter 2. The Source of and Need for Avatâras. Brothers, you will recall that yesterday, whilst dividing the subject under various headings, I delineated specific inquiries which we propose to address sequentially. We dealt yesterday with the question, what is an avatar? The second question that we are to attempt to answer, what is the source of avatars, is an inquiry that plunges us deep into the mysteries of the cosmos and requires at least an outline of cosmic growth and evolution in order to provide an intelligible reply. I hope today to be able also to deal with the subsequent inquiry, how does the need for avatars arise? This will leave for tomorrow the subject of the specific avatars, and I shall endeavor, if possible, during tomorrow's discourse, to touch upon 9 of the avatars out of the 10 recognized as distinguished from all other manifestations of the Supreme. Then, if I am able to accomplish that task, we shall still have one morning remaining, and that I propose to dedicate entirely to the study of the greatest of the avatars, the Lord Sri Krishna himself, endeavoring, if possible, to delineate the sublime characteristics of his life and his work, and it may be to confront and answer some of the cavils of the ignorant which, especially in these latter days, have been directed against him by those who comprehend nothing of his nature, nothing of the monumental work he came to accomplish in the world. Now we are to commence today by seeking an answer to the question, what is the source of avatars? And it is probable that I shall pursue a trajectory of thought somewhat unfamiliar, carrying us, as it does, beyond the ordinary boundaries of our study, which deals more with the evolution of man, of the spiritual nature within him. It transports us to those primordial times, nigh inconceivable to us, when our universe was emerging into manifestation, when its very foundations, as it were being established. In answering the question, however, the reply itself is simple. It is recognized in all religions acknowledging divine incarnations, and they include the great religions of the world. It is admitted that the source of avatars, the source of the divine incarnations, is the second or middle manifestation of the sacred triad. It is immaterial whether, with the Hindus, we speak of the Trimurti or whether, with Christians, we speak of the Trinity. The fundamental concept is one and the same. Taking first for a moment the Christian symbology, you will observe that every Christian affirms that the one divine incarnation acknowledged in Christianity, for in Christianity they believe in one specific incarnation only, you will find in the Christian nomenclature that the divine incarnation or avatar is that of the second person of the Trinity. No Christian will assert that there has ever been an incarnation of God the Father, the primeval source of life. They will never claim that there has been an incarnation of the third person of the Trinity, the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of wisdom, of creative intelligence, who fashioned the materials of the universe. But they will always maintain that it was the second person, the Son, who assumed human form, who appeared in the semblance of humanity, who was manifested as man to assist in the salvation of the world. And if you analyze what is signified by that phrase, what, to the mind of the Christian, is conveyed by the concept of the second person of the Trinity, for remember, in dealing with a religion that is not yours, you should seek for the thought, not the form. You should look at the idea, not the label, for the concepts are universal while the forms divide. The ideas are identical while the labels are indices of separation. If you seek for the underlying thought, you will discover it is this. The sign of the second person of the Trinity is duality. Furthermore, he is the underlying life of the world. By his power the worlds were created and are sustained, supported, and protected. You will find that while the spirit of wisdom is described as bringing order out of disorder, cosmos out of chaos, it is by the manifested Word of God, or the second person of the Trinity. It is by him that all forms are constructed in this world, and it is specially in his image that man is made. So also when we turn to what will be more familiar to the vast majority of you, the symbology of Hinduism, you will find that all avatars have their source in Vihu, in him who pervades the universe, as the very name Vihu implies, who is the supporter, the protector, the pervading, all-permeating life by which the universe is held together, and by which it is sustained. Taking the names of the Trimurti so familiar to us all, not the philosophical names Sat, Chit, Ananda, those names which in philosophy denote the attributes of the Supreme Brahman. Taking the concrete concept, we have Mahadeva or Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma, three names, just as in the other religion we have three names. But the same fact emerges that it is the middle or central one of the three who is the source of avatars. There has never been a direct avatar of Mahadeva, of Shiva himself. Appearances? Most assuredly. Manifestations? Indeed. Manifesting in a form for a specific purpose served by that form? Unquestionably. Take the Mahabharata, and you find him appearing in the form of the hunter, the Kirata, testing the intuition of Arjuna, and struggling with him to test his strength, his courage, and finally his devotion to himself. But that is a mere form assumed for a purpose and cast aside the moment the purpose is served. Almost, we may say, a transient illusion, produced to serve a special purpose and then discarded as having completed that which it was intended to perform. Over and over again you find such appearances of Mahadeva. You may recall one most beautiful narrative, in which he appears in the form of a Chandala, an outcast, equivalent to a scavenger, at the gateway of his own city of Kashi, when one who was especially overshadowed by a manifestation of himself, Sri Shankaracharya, was approaching with his disciples to the sacred city, veiling himself in the form of an outcast, for to him all forms are the same. The human differences are but as the grains of sand which vanish before the majesty of his greatness. He prostrated himself in the dust before the gateway, so that the great teacher could not traverse the path without touching him, and he called to the Chandala to make way in order that the Brahma might proceed unpolluted by the touch of the outcast. Then the Lord, speaking through the form he had chosen, rebuked the very one whom his power overshadowed, asking him questions which he could not answer, and thus abasing his pride and teaching him humility. Such forms truly he has assumed, but these are not what we can term avatars. They are mere ephemeral forms, not manifestations upon earth where a life is lived and a great drama is enacted. So it is with Brahma. He also has appeared from time to time, has manifested himself for some special purpose. But there is no avatar of Brahma which we can designate by that very definite and well-understood term. Now for this fact there must be some reason. Why is it that we do not find the source of avatars alike in all these great divine manifestations? Why do they come from only one aspect, and that the aspect of Vihu? It is scarcely necessary to remind you that there exists but one self, and that the appellations we employ are merely the names of the aspects manifested by the Supreme, we must not distinguish them to such a degree that we lose sight of the underlying unity. For recall how, when a worshipper of Vihu harbored animosity in his heart against a worshipper of Mahadeva, as he bowed before the image of Hari, the countenance of the idol divided itself in half, and Shiva or Hara appeared on one side while Vihu or Hari appeared on the other, and the two, smiling as a single face upon the bigoted worshipper, revealed to him that Mahadeva and Vihu were but one. Nevertheless, regarding their functions, a division arises. They manifest along divergent lines, as it were, within the cosmos and for the assistance of man. It is not for him, but for us, that these lines of apparent separateness emerge. Viewing the matter in this light, we shall be able to discover the answer to our inquiry, not merely regarding who is the source of avatars, but why Vihu specifically is that source. It is here that I approach the unfamiliar portion of our subject, wherein I must solicit your particular attention concerning the construction of the universe. I employ the term universe here to denote our solar system. There exist myriad other systems, each complete in itself and, therefore, rightly designated a cosmos, a universe. However, each of these systems is, in its turn, part of a mightier system, and our Sun, the center of our own system, though it be in very truth the manifested physical body of Ishwara himself, is not the only sun. If you gaze through the vast fields of space, myriads of suns are present, each one the center of its own system, of its own universe. And our Sun, supreme to us, is but, as it were, a planet in a vaster system, its orbit curved around a sun greater than itself. Thus, in turn, that sun around which our own is circling acts as a planet to a yet mightier sun, and each set of systems circles in its turn around a more central sun, and so on. We know not how far that chain, which to us is illimitable, may stretch. For who is capable of plumbing the depths and heights of space, or discovering a manifested circumference that encompasses all universes? Nay, we affirm that they are infinite in number, and that there is no end to the manifestations of the one life. This is true in the physical sense. View the physical universe with the eye of spirit, and you perceive within it a portrait of the spiritual universe. A profound word was spoken by one of the masters or ishis, whom in this society we honor and whose teachings we follow. Addressing one of his disciples or pupils, he rebuked him, stating in words never to be forgotten by those who have read them, "You always look at the things of the spirit with the eyes of the flesh. What you ought to do is to look at the things of the flesh with the eyes of the spirit." What is the significance of this? It implies that, rather than attempting to degrade the spiritual, limiting it within the narrow bounds of the physical, or asserting that the spiritual cannot exist because the human brain is unable clearly to grasp it, we ought to observe the physical universe with deeper insight. We should see in it the image, the shadow, the reflection of the spiritual world, and learn spiritual verities by studying the images of them that exist in the physical world around us. The physical world is more readily grasped. Do not imagine the spiritual is modeled upon the physical. The physical is fundamentally modeled upon the spiritual, and if you view the physical with the eye of spirit, you discover that it is the image of the higher, and you are then able to comprehend the higher truth by studying the faint reflections visible in the world around you. This is what I ask you to do now. Just as you possess your sun and suns, numerous universes, each part of a system mightier than itself, so in the spiritual universe there exists hierarchy beyond hierarchy of spiritual intelligences who stand as the sons of the spiritual world. Our physical system holds at its center the great spiritual intelligence manifested as a trinity, the Ishvara of that system. Beyond him lies a mightier Ishvara, around whom those on the level of the Ishvara of our system circle, looking to him as their central life. And beyond him yet another, and beyond him others and others still, until, just as the physical universes exceed our thinking, the spiritual hierarchy also stretches beyond our thought, and, dazzled and blinded by the splendor, we sink back to earth, much as Arjuna was blinded when the Vaibhava form shone forth upon him, and we cry, "Oh, show us again thy more limited form that we may know it and live by it." We are not yet prepared for the mightier manifestations. We are blinded, not aided, by such a blaze of divine splendor. Thus, we find that if we wish to learn, we must limit ourselves, nay, we must endeavor to expand ourselves to the boundaries of our own system. Wherefore, I have encountered individuals who possess no true grasp of this little world, this grain of dust in which they dwell, yet who cannot be content unless you answer inquiries regarding the one existence, the Parabrahma, whom sages revere in silence, daring not to speak even with an illuminated mind that knows nirvanic life and has expanded to nirvanic consciousness. The more ignorant the man, the more he believes he can comprehend. The less he understands, the more he resents being told that there are matters beyond the reach of his intellect, existences so mighty that he cannot even dream of the lowest attributes that distinguish them. For myself, acknowledging my own ignorance and knowing that many an age must pass before I shall be capable of addressing these profounder problems, I sometimes gauge the ignorance of the inquirer by the questions he poses regarding ultimate existences, and when he demands to know what he terms the primary origin, I know that he has not grasped even the 1,000th part of the origin from which he himself has sprung. Therefore, I state to you frankly that these mighty ones whom we worship are the gods of our system. Beyond them stretch mightier ones still, whom, perhaps myriads of kalpas hence, we may begin to understand and worship. Let us then confine ourselves to our own system and rejoice if we can catch some ray of the glory that illumines it. Vihu possesses his own functions, as do Brahma and Mahadeva. The initial work in this system is performed by the third of the sacred great ones of the Trimurti, Brahma, as you are all aware, for you have read that the creative intelligence came forth as the third of the divine manifestations. I care not which symbology you adopt. Perchance that of the Vihu Pura will be most familiar, wherein the unmanifested Vihu lies beneath the water, standing as the first of the Trimurti, then the lotus standing as the second, and the open lotus revealing Brahma, the third, the creative mind. You may recall that the work of creation commenced with his activity. When we study, from the occult standpoint, in what that activity consisted, we find it consisted in impregnating with his own life the matter of the solar system, that he gave his own life to build up form after form of atom, to establish the great divisions in the cosmos, and that he formed, one after another, the 5 kinds of matter. Working by his mind, he is sometimes designated Mahat, the Great One, intelligence. He formed the tattvas one after another. Tattvas, you may remember from last year, are the foundations of the atoms, and there are 5 of them manifested at the present time. That is his specific task. Then he meditates and forms as thoughts come forth. There his manifest work may be said to end, though he maintains ever the life of the atom. As far as the active labor of the cosmos is concerned, he yields to the next of the great forces that is to operate, the force of Vihu. His work is to gather together that matter which has been built, shaped, prepared, and vivified, and to build it into definite forms in accordance with the creative ideas brought forth by the meditation of Brahma. He imparts to matter a binding force. He endows it with those energies that cohere form. No form exists without him, whether it be animate or inanimate. How frequently does Sri Krishna, speaking as the Supreme Vihu, emphasize this fact? He is the life within every form. Were it absent, the form could not exist. Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.